Okay, this is how to use a compressor. Okay, so today I want to go over some quick and handy tips on how to use a compressor. I'm not going to dive too deep into what compression is. There's plenty of videos out there about that. This is really about how to get the best results from any compressors that you have. So first up, what does a compressor do? Well, a compressor controls the volume of the input signal over time to create the output signal. So most compressors share a couple of controls in common. They are threshold, attack, release, ratio. So to quickly explain each of those, the threshold is the input level at which the compressor starts to take effect. So essentially, when the input signal goes above the threshold, the compressor starts to take effect. How long it takes until it's fully active is the attack time. And once the signal drops below the threshold, how long until the compressor is no longer having any impact at all is the release time. So that's the first three: threshold, attack, and release. So threshold is a measurement in decibels, and attack and release are measurements of time. So the remaining one is the ratio, and that's the overall amount of compression. Now the ratio is specified as a ratio. It's usually 1 to 1 or 2 to 1 or 4 to 1. If we use 4 to 1 as our example, for any 4 decibels put in, we'll get 1 decibel out. So that's all that ratio is. How much in becomes how much out. So a ratio of 1 to 1 means no compression is being applied. A ratio of 2 to 1 means that for every 2 decibels put in, 1 decibel comes out. So for a 10 to 1 ratio, for 10 decibels in, we're getting 1 decibel out. Let's jump into Ableton and we'll go through using a couple of different compressors. Okay, here we are in Ableton and we've got this loop set up, which we're going to be using as our example today. Okay, cool. So that's what the loop sounds like, and we're going to apply compression to each of the individual elements. Let's start off with the drums. For this one, we'll use the stock Ableton compressor. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn off this makeup button, which applies automatic makeup gain, which basically makes the sound louder as it becomes more compressed. We don't want that for the moment because we want to be able to hear the actual results, including if it makes things a bit quieter, that's fine. So the first thing we're going to do is going to push the ratio up so it's a bit too high, and we're going to bring the threshold way down so it's compressing way too much. So that's great. That's way too compressed, and that's what we want to start with because we're now going to dial in the attack and the release section of the settings. So I generally start with the attack first, and too fast an attack will sound like this. Where it's essentially just turned the volume of the whole thing down, and too long an attack will sound like this, where there's essentially no change. So I'll bring the attack down and you'll be able to hear the difference that makes to the sound. So you can see and hear that there's a small attack portion of the sound still left in. Probably this 5 milliseconds is too short, so I'll bring it out a bit. So to me, the drums sound nice and some pokey there. And so now we can A/B that. So definitely it's made things quieter. Let's bring up the output gain a bit. So to me, that sounds about the same perceived volume. We've changed the shape of the drums, but we haven't changed the volume too much. Now for the release, we can bring that in nice and short, or we can push it out. So with the release too long, it's not coming back to zero between the individual hits. So what I'm looking for here is to enhance the rhythm of the overall loop. So if the release is very short, each individual hit is compressed individually. And if the release is too long, then the compression doesn't end, so the attack portion isn't triggered again. So I'll bring the release down. To me, that sounds about right. So now that we've got the time parameters locked in, let's bring the ratio down. So it's a bit more gentle, and we'll bring the threshold back up to 0, and we'll bring it down until we get just the effect that we're after. To me, that sounds about right. So we'll just check that we've gain matched that. So we'll turn the compressor on and off. Okay, it's a little bit too loud with the compressor on. We'll bring this down a smidgen. Okay, so it feels like we've improved the overall feel of those drums without going too hard. So we did that by setting the attack, setting the release, then setting the ratio and the threshold. So we'll do the same on this bass part now. Here's the bass part without compression. So let's bring in a compressor. We'll use the glue compressor this time, and we'll bring the threshold way down. And now we'll set the attack. I'd say we go with the long attack, and we can set the release now. Yeah, I feel like a fast release is about right for that. Okay, now we can bring the threshold up until we get just the amount of compression that we're after. I'm going to push the makeup gain a bit so that I can hear what's going on. Cool, to me that sounds good. We'll just check that this is gain matched. It's close. We'll bring the makeup gain down. Cool, and that's our bass part. You can hear it sounds a little bit thicker and a little bit fuller, but it isn't actually any louder than the original. Okay, and we'll do the same again with this piano part. So this could do with a little bit of compression, but not too much. Okay, so this is the neutron compressor. And first off, we'll turn off auto gain so we can hear what it's really doing to the volume. And we'll bring the threshold down. So to me, that sounds okay. Let's try messing with the attack to see if we can get it to see what the effect is. So we don't actually want that percussive part of the sound because this is kind of a background element. We'll bring it back so it's quite a short attack. And so let's bring out the release and then bring it back. Now that we've got those roughly set, let's bring the threshold back up to a reasonable level. And we'll just check that that's gain matched. And probably bring it up 1 dB. To me, that sounds about the same volume. Okay, so this whole mix bus could do with a little compression. We're going to use the Ozone Vintage compressor. And the first thing we'll do is turn off auto gain. And we'll bring the threshold down and push the ratio up. I'm also going to push out the release a little bit. And we're going to dial in the attack so we can just start to hear the start of each drum hit nicely. So I think somewhere around there I'm hearing it. So about 25 or 30 millisecond. Then we'll bring the release in. Okay, now we can pull the ratio down to something much lighter, maybe 2 to 1, and we'll put the threshold at 0 and we'll bring it down until we get just a touch. And once again, we need to gain match that, so we'll turn it off and on a few times and get the volume just perfect. Cool, so to me there, I can't hear the volume difference, but I can hear the dynamic difference between turning it on and off. Now, if we want to be able to hear the overall impact of what we've just done, we can map the on-off buttons to one key. So we edit key map, and I'll map all of the on buttons for all of the compressors to one key. So now if I hit dot, the compressors will all turn on and off. So here's none of our compressors. And here's with our 4 compressors switched on. Okay, so I'll turn them on and off a few times so you can hear the A-B difference as part of the loop. So in here, that's made a subtle difference to each layer. The drums sound a little bit poppier, the bass sounds a little more consistent, and the chords sound a little bit more present, all achieved through just subtle amounts of compression on each individual channel. All right, so that was how to use a compressor. Once again, this wasn't exhaustive, it's not a comprehensive guide, it's just how I do things and how I dial in the right settings for a particular source material. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one.